Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we're learning Yevamot page 95, which discusses a situation trying to find out where a forbidden relationship sometimes is called kal, lenient, in comparison to something more strict. The one which is more strict is a situation where a person has relations with his wife's sister. And the Talmud, interestingly enough, ends up concluding and saying that Ashes Ish, the case of having relations with another man's wife, a married woman, is actually one which is kal, which is lenient, which one would certainly think that is not the case, because that's a capital offense and certainly one of the most serious offenses and sins that a person can possibly commit. But nonetheless, it's still considered to be light in comparison to taking one's wife's sister in one regard, and that is the following. Even though a person is obviously not allowed to have relations with a married woman, there is a way out. And that if the husband would give a get, a divorce document, then she is completely free to the extent that you can now marry her, and that's perfectly fine. However, when it comes to your wife, if she has a sister, you are not allowed to marry that sister. Even if you would divorce your wife, you're still not allowed to marry her sister. The only time you're allowed to marry your wife's sister is if your wife actually dies, if the sister dies. Then the Torah actually will allow you to marry her sister. But until that time, one is not allowed to do so. So it's very fascinating. The Talmud, therefore, in some respect, will look at the case of Ashes Ish as something which is kal, which is light. And again, it all has to do with perspective. If a person wishes to compare even, again, the most stringent of sins, but it can always be looked upon in a more light manner if it's compared to something else. And that's an important thing for ourselves as well, that we could always compare ourselves and we can say, well, I'm not very healthy, but in comparison to someone else, I guess I'm not so bad. If a person has that perspective, then a person may not necessarily wish to or be motivated to improve. However, instead, you should compare yourself to maybe someone who is extremely healthy, someone who is very self-conscious to make sure that they eat well, they exercise, and then all of a sudden you've changed the perspective, and maybe you should say, oh, well, in that case, maybe I should be more healthy. So just like in the Talmud, when it comes to anything in life, it all depends on what we compare ourselves to. And therefore, we should always raise the bar and compare ourselves to something and someone and people who will elevate us to higher places.